Posted by you/Lucas78. Serious, hello scientists of Reddit, what's a scary science fact that the public knows nothing about? Scientific literature conclusion on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases in general is that the diseases start decades before the first obvious symptoms and that we need to treat them at this stage. When you exhibit obvious symptoms, it's too late, your brain is already mush. If you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, you had the disease since your early 40s at least. And you experienced very mild symptoms but didn't notice it. And your brain fought like hell to compensate the deficit. When you get diagnosed, your brain is already very severely damaged and will never recover from the deficit. If your dog swims in a lake after receiving a spot-on flea treatment, it absolutely decimates the invertebrate population. A large dog swimming in 8 Olympic swimming pools worth of water soon after treatment will leach enough neurotoxin to kill 50% of the lake's invertebrate population within 48 hours. There's some awareness of this, but it's not being taken seriously enough. Cancer geneticist here. Most cases of cancer that are sequenced generally just denote the prognosis or how long a patient has to live, rather than treatment options. People always say let's cure cancer, however, this simplifies cancer as though it is only one disease. It's far more complicated than that. I studied at one of the largest cancer hospitals in the world where the motto is to make cancer history. But the only obtainable goal is to make it chronic. We study and research as much as possible, but every cancer requires different research, and unfortunately the powers that be often prohibit funding and proficient research. It's work I am passionate about, but also a broken system that is infuriating to work in. Prions. Misfolded proteins that cause a cascade of protein misfoldings that lead to amyloid plaque buildups, resulting in uncontrollable neurodegeneration that is fatal in 100% of cases within 2 years. There is no cure. We don't understand what causes it. We don't understand the mechanism of the misfolding cascade. We don't even fully understand the structure of the misfolded proteins. It could in theory happen to anyone, at any time, and there's no way to tell until you start showing symptoms, at which point you might have 18 months to live, if you're lucky, the last 6 of which will be intensely unpleasant. Soil science adjacent researcher here. We are degrading, polluting, and losing our topsoil at such a rate that we may not be able to produce enough food to feed everyone within 50 to 60 years, let alone what impacts climate change may bring to bear on our food supply. And the US government's crop insurance programs and incentives all reinforce the bad practices, while discouraging regenerative practices. These bad policies are extremely hard to change because of lobbying from the major agribusiness companies, who make money off of these short-sighted policies. Our food supply is further threatened by our agricultural overdependence on aquifer water, which is not being replenished, making it an unsustainable source of water. If the aquifers are overdrawn, depleted, or polluted, we hit a hard wall of water scarcity, and we will have no backups to address the problem with. The drawdown of the aquifers also causes land subsidence, which causes costly infrastructure and building damage. The general public does not realize the impending crisis that will be caused by the confluence of these factors. Antibiotics has been abused and misused for so long, that various bacteria strains have started to get resistance to them. What used to be a treatable infection, might soon become deadly because we are unable to treat it with the antibiotics we have today. There is research to try and find other ways to treat antibiotic-resistant bacteria. But until then, please use prescribed antibiotics until they are finished, not until you feel better. If unsued, do not flush them down the toilet or put them in the bin. Give it to a pharmacy so they can discard them correctly, and use antibiotics when necessary. Some countries give them willy-nilly while others are more conservative. Topsoil loss is pretty scary for the medium-long term. For example, for a quick overview. This glosses over heterogeneity. For example, we're burning through soil in the Midwest much faster than other parts of the US. Interestingly enough, a lot of the damage from the Dust Bowl is still in place, but we're relying on more input-intensive methods to eke out results. Fertilizer runoff is also causing a giant anoxic dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. The nutrients feed algae, which has a population explosion and rots en masse. Some are holding out for usable soil opening up at high latitudes, for example Canada, Siberia, with climate change, but at least near term that isn't too promising given that it will generally be poorer soil, for example less phosphate, and melting permafrost won't be too reliable for quite a while. While vertical farming and the like is making advances, as I understand it most of what's practical to grow tends to be inefficient calorie-wise. A repeat of an earlier post, but damn does it fit so well. The original nuclear bombs leveled the cities they detonated over, yet are considered puny by today's standards. The most powerful nuclear bomb ever created, the Tsar Bomba, had an explosive yield 3,000 times more powerful than the original nuclear bombs, and its power was calculated to be more than 10 times the combined power of every single munition used in World War II. That includes every bullet fired, every grenade thrown, every artillery shell fired, every bomb dropped, and of course, the 2 nuclear bombs dropped. It was detonated 4 kilometers from the ground over the remote Severny Island, yet still completely destroyed towns within a couple hundred kilometers of the blast and broke windows as far away as Copenhagen, Denmark. The shockwave from the blast circled the globe 9 times. The plane that dropped it was given a 50-50 chance of survival. Yet, the bomb was originally designed to be twice as powerful. On the flip side of the great attractor is the Boötes Void, which I find a bit creepy. The Boötes Void, sometimes called the Great Void, is a huge, spherical region of space that contains very few galaxies. It's approximately 700 million light-years from Earth and located near the constellation Boötes, which is how it got its name. The supervoid measures 250 million light-years in diameter, representing approximately 0.27% of the diameter of the observable universe, which itself is a daunting 93 billion light-years across. Its volume is estimated at 236,000 mcp3, making it the largest known void in the universe. At first, astronomers were only able to find 8 galaxies across the expanse, but further observations revealed a total of 60 galaxies. Now, while that might still seem like a lot, it would be like stumbling upon only 60 objects across a region larger than the continental United States, and that's just in 2 dimensions. According to astronomer Greg Aldering, the scale of the void is such that, if the Milky Way had been in the center of the Boötes Void, we wouldn't have known there were other galaxies until the 1960s. Looking at the volume of the Boötes Void, it should contain about 10,000 galaxies, when considering that the average distance between galaxies elsewhere in the universe is a few million light-years. But the question is, why and how this void came to be? There hasn't been enough time since the universe began for mere gravitational forces to clear out a space of that size. There's a theory which suggests that supervoids are caused by the intermingling of smaller mini-voids, like soap bubbles coming together. But a more, maybe creepier, explanation is that the Boötes Void could be the result of an expanding Kardashev 3-scale civilization. As the colonization bubble expands outward from its home system, the civilization dims each star, and subsequently each galaxy, it encounters by blanketing it in a Dyson shell. This might also explain why the void has such a nice, spherical shape. Oh, and we're seeing a snapshot of the void 700 million years ago. A lot could have happened in 700 million years that we just cannot see/know due to the inherent speed of light. There's a solar event known as a CME, or a coronal mass ejection. It occurs very frequently on a cosmic timescale. Every few decades to centuries there's a decent size one. Why are they scary? A CME is a massive burst of radiation, easily able to fully envelope the Earth in its path, and it's the equivalent of a non-stop EMP barrage. The last time a big one hit Earth was when we had telegraph lines for communications and they spontaneously caught fire. In today's world, with everything running on electricity, when the next big one hits we'll have at most a few days warning, and it'd be a literal apocalypse movie scenario, with planes going down due to their whole electrical system frying, nobody's vehicle starting, untold billions in fire damage would wreak havoc everywhere, and the machines we depend on to help would be similarly fried. Suum stuff would be unaffected, being parked in deep, concrete-roofed parking garages and the like, but our entire infrastructure would be useless for years. It'd literally send us into a mini dark age while people tried to get things working again. Recovery would take decades to centuries. Helium. Fun for party balloons. Everybody likes a squeaky voice. Except helium is a vital component of various high-tech devices such as MRIs. Helium is also light enough that the Earth's gravity cannot contain it. And we are running out. Not today, not tomorrow, but we are frivolously wasting it when we should be jealously hoarding it, and eventually we won't have any left, and a lot of our wonderful technology will suddenly stop working. I've got 3 for you. 1. Rabies. Once symptomatic, rabies has a 100% fatality rate. The only options are the rabies vaccine and immunoglobulin therapy, which, again, must be administered before any symptoms. 2. Gamma-ray bursts, henceforth referred to as GRBs. GRBs are a rare phenomenon emitted from the poles of rapidly spinning supernovae and hypernovae. In the event of a direct hit from suitably close, which is actually really, really far, all life on Earth would be wiped out. The facing side would be annihilated instantly, while the trailing side would quickly die due to the conditions on Earth no longer being suitable to support life. And there is absolutely nothing we can do about it. 3. Runaway global warming. There are many stores of greenhouse gases, namely carbon dioxide and methane, all over the place. But the conditions required to keep these gases trapped are delicate. The worst part? It may already be too late to stop, even if humanity immediately ceased all greenhouse gas emissions and put every single resource we have into carbon sequestration. Here's a few scary medical science facts regarding CPR that you won't often hear in your first aid/CPR class put on in school. I only learned this stuff after schooling to become an EMT. What's the success rate of CPR? The average person assumes 75% or greater. In reality, it's barely 10%. It's one of the first things they told us in training, because all new people have way too high of an expectation to the effectiveness of CPR. It can be very depressing when you're doing everything you were trained, and aren't getting the results you think you should be getting. The time from collapse to administration of a shock via AED is absolutely paramount. They say the chances of survival drop 10% per minute. Oh, and rescue breaths. If you're not being very, and I mean very careful, you'll cause gastric dissension. You'll literally be blowing up their stomach, and they will vomit. Then there's the cracks and crackles. If done right, it'll sound and feel like you're breaking every rib in little old lady Nelson's chest. You're likely not, it's cartilage and other bits shifting. Although, if you're a bit too vigorous, you may very well break a rib or two. But hey, they're already dead. So it doesn't matter. They'd rather be alive with a broken rib, than dead. Haven't seen this one yet, insects are going extinct. We have lost a significant chunk just since the 80s. I think it was around 20%? Mozzies are going up, because of course, but just about everything else is going. Wasn't until I read this that I realized that as a kid in the 90s I used to see butterflies all the time. Dragonflies. My house used to get invaded by Christmas beetles every year. Not so much. These days I might see only 1 or 2 Christmas beetles in December, if any at all. When I was a kid I remember finding 8 in my house in a single night. Same house. In the UK, about 17% of people have fetal alcohol syndrome, Maguire et al., 1992. As much as 17% of us are developmentally disabled simply because, prior to the late 90s, a large proportion of British mothers drank during pregnancy, 41%. Thankfully the prevalence rate has been falling fast since the late 90s when all this research was published, but it's terrifying to see how much of an effect FOST is having on society. Application security engineer here. I know that cybersecurity is not the science most people were probably hoping for, but I have some fun facts about your data. For starters, Facebook builds shadow profiles of people, so even if you don't have a Facebook, you do. Facebook collects your data from many sites you visit. If you see a like/share button on Facebook, they're collecting the data and adding it to the shadow profile. They basically stalk you, from seeing how long you're on a web page, to what you click. This is usually used for advertisement purposes, but was also used for nefarious purposes as seen with Cambridge Analytica. Secondly, in many countries, namely the USA, your data is for sale. From voter records to your address, and the people you live with. Each US state has their own laws about selling voter data, but for example North Carolina allows you to download all the voter data for free. The voter data included is full name, address, voter ID, phone number, race/ethnicity, gender, where you were born, when you were born, county, age, driver's license number, and more. We wanted to see how accurate this could be and used Florida voter data to check my stepfather's information. It gave us his current address, voter ID, full name, phone number, and what party he voted for in 2020. It was also all accurate. Third, with breaches like the one we saw with Facebook, people can cross-reference your information and find you easily. If you think about it, this could lead to extreme terrorism from people who don't agree with you politically. Which is pretty scary. Finally, if you toss in a website like White Pages, they can cross-reference this information to find friends, family, previous numbers, addresses and sometimes emails, of you and your loved ones. And all this information is protected only by a paywall. If they want to really get into the OSINT of this, they can look for breaches on your email or number in database dumps on sites like dhash.com, and could potentially take over your accounts. Some breaches might even include hacked voter data, which straight up leaks your social security number. TLDR? All your data is public knowledge and it can be used to harass, stalk, intimidate, or harm you and your loved ones, but there's little legislation on it because a lot of people argue I have not hying to hide. Working in this field you realize, everyone has something to hide but only care when it's too late. Botox is made from botulinum toxin. This toxin is produced by the bacterium Clostridium botulinum, and is considered to be one of the most poisonous, lethal substances known to mankind. The toxin is a neurotoxin that blocks nerve signals to muscles. Consequently, it prevents muscles injected with Botox from contracting, tensing. So they become weak or paralyzed, thus improving the appearance of wrinkles and fine lines. Fortunately though, Botox is only injected in small, targeted doses, and is considered extremely safe as long as it's made and provided by a licensed professional.